Hello there Reason people, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel and welcome to my very first snippet video. A snippet video is going to be like a snapshot in time. It could be of a project I'm working on and there might be an element within that project which could be just worth talking about rather than the project as a whole. In this particular case I'm referring to this as my Snip-it in C Project B series, so I'm going to be doing little snapshots as I build this project up, and we're at the very beginning of this particular project. And this project is probably going to take a few weeks to actually really get it sorted. About the end of 2019, I actually released a track called In C, which was made up of loads of modular devices. I was using like all the Murph stuff in the Poly system from Blamsoft, and I had some A series in there, all sorts of bits and bobs. But the actual MIDI for that was, I wrote a program outside of Reason, generated all the MIDI, brought it into Reason, and off we went. Well, I've decided I want to try and reproduce an In C project within Reason itself. It may not be feasible, we may not get the results we're looking for, but hey, this is something I like to do. There's going to be a lot of technical stuff which I'm going to have to try and resolve or I've never thought about, and that's the sort of thing I obviously love to do. So for those who don't know In C, I'm just going to grab my mouse and just pull up some music for you. We've got all this lovely gobbledygook, because that's what it looks like to me. I can't read music, I decipher music. So yes, I can come along and I can say, oh yes, we've got a C here. But a lot of the time when I'm looking at this, I'm saying to myself, face, and every good boy deserves favours. I decipher it. I cannot read music like other people do. So this is what's called In C. It was written back in the 1960s by Terry Riley. And basically it consists of, as you can see, they're all numbered, these phrases, 53 phrases. You have a group of musicians. I think he recommended at one stage 32 musicians. My piece I did at the back end of 2019, I had 16 instruments, and people play it with a lot smaller group. It's usually played obviously live, and we're obviously bringing it into the Reason world. And the way it works is quite simple. This is the score, which doesn't look like, if anyone who knows music knows this is not a traditional score at all. No one tells anyone what to do, but everyone starts at phrase one and they move through. They are allowed to skip a phrase, I believe. People please correct me if anyone knows In C really well. I know you can sit out of a section if you want to, but basically you start off on this phrase and you can repeat this pattern if you really wanted to 1,000 times. But if you're with a group of musicians and you're repeating that pattern 1,000 times, I doubt they'll ever invite you back again. And you move on to the next phrase when you feel like it, and you repeat this, and so on and so forth. There's other little rules, which is if I was sitting here repeating this phrase, let's say instrument number one, and instrument number two happened to move along, say, to phrase number four, and instrument number four wants to move on to phrase number five, well, really, he can't. He's listening and saying, well, actually, I can hear someone still on phrase number one. I'm not allowed to go more than 3 phrases ahead. I've got to wait. But really, instrument number one person should be saying, oh, someone's on number 4. Really, I should move up one because I'm lagging. So I think of it as a bit of like a caterpillar, the way this would move along, and the way the instruments will move apart from each other across the phrases and then might start catching up. But say this was instrument number one, this was instrument number two, time we've got down to here, this could be instrument number one here, and instrument number two might be back here. So now instrument number two is lagging behind instrument number one. So they will change because it all comes down to how many times we're going to repeat the phrases as we're going through it. So this is, as I say, this is what In C was, and this is what I actually generated externally using a program. It was a bit of a cheap program really, because I was basically randomizing how many repeats are we going to do and move on, and I kept it very tight and small, so the phrases didn't move out of line. But I'm looking to make a much more complex one within Reason. To start with, I'm going to be making a basic In C program or project, whatever you want to classify it within Reason, and then I'm going to start trying to add some real more clever weighted randomization processes to try and get things to work more in a natural kind of world. So in this particular snippet, all I'm going to really talk about is getting this data, because that's how I see it, these notes, this data, and I'm going to see how I can get this into Reason. Now, yes, I've said we've got to move sequentially along, but from a programming point of view or from a logical point of view, I need a way that I can store these phrases in Reason and I can call anyone I want at any time. Yes, as I said, we're going like this, but theoretically I should be able to call that one or call that one next. I should be able to do it in any order. So straight away we need some kind of pattern device to store this. That's a very obvious choice that we've got to go for. Now, there is quite a lot of different pattern devices within Reason, but then we've got to start looking at, we've got different lengths which are going on, so it's something we've really got to start considering. Obviously we've got like a 64th note, and we're going up to 4 notes of whole bar. I don't know, what do you call it in your music world? I don't know, a whole bar, I don't know what you call it. Yeah, 4 notes to me. Lengths. So we've got, and even a longer one. So we've got to take that into consideration. And I looked at a number of devices. Compulsion was one I was actually leaning towards, because within compulsion we've got all that division stuff and all the rest of it. So I could start doing some real fancy stuff with that. But the one I really wanted to use and I started to look towards was sequences. It made a bit more sense to me to try and use sequences. But we've got some dilemmas, and in fact the two hardest ones in all of this was, actually, believe it or not, is the first one, in fact it'd be the first two, and phrase number 35, being the fact that it's 8 bars long. So why do these two particular, say, over everything else, cause kind of issues? Well, within sequences, we obviously set up our rate, and which is like our division. So if I was to set up a 1/64th rate, well, I can only get half a bar out of sequences. That's all I can for that whole sort of step, that whole measure. It's, in fact, let's actually quickly have a quick look at it. So I've actually managed to get the data in, and this is it. So it's half a bar. It's not much data we can fit into that. So then how am I going to get an 8-bar piece into this one? Well, I'm actually going to put it into another sequence, and I'm going to change the rate, and I'll talk about that in a second. This really should be, and anyone out there who understands music, please step forward. I'd love you to actually come through and just double check that I've actually programmed all these sequences correctly from that sheet music. As I say, this is quite gobbledygook to me, and I've tried to work. Yeah, it's great. I've learned a bit more about music, but I can guarantee you this time next week I've forgotten half the things which I've just had to do to get this stuff into Reason. Oh, I'm clicking on the wrong screen. Let's click on the right screen. So yeah, so this first one should be 3/4 of a bar long. Because it's the way it's a repeating pattern, that's no problem. It's a very quick pattern. So I've just sort of snapped it off there, and I'm just going to repeat that as much as I want. Thankfully, the second one happened to have a 64th in, and yeah, so it fitted in half a bar. So I was quite lucky that that second one actually did fit in half a bar. Now, the 35 one, this was the biggest pain ever going, and it might be easier to actually look at it here, phrase 35. So here is phrase 35. And the reason this is such a pain is, I say, we've got 64th notes. When you start, as I say, we need to think about how we're going to fit this into sequences. And the problem is we've got notes really going over bars all over the place. One of the things I found I could do, and one of the things I did do, and I was amazed that I've actually managed to fit this 8 bars into a 1/8 rate sequences track. Why is 1/8 good? Well, 1/8 would actually give me 4 bars. Let me get this right. Yeah, so 64th would give me half a bar. Yeah, so 1/8 gives me 4 bars, but hang on, this is double the length. So how can I get double the data in a 4-bar loop? I was looking at options of trying to split it between two different patterns and then sort of have like a bit of automation going on. But it was this one here which was a bit of a killer one, trying to work out what am I going to do with this note here. It's because it's going over to this bar number 5. This is a real killer note. With the 60, these are 16th notes. These weren't an issue to fit in a 1/8 bar, because in sequences I could turn the ratchet on and have 2, which gave me a 1/8 note. In fact, let's have a look at that, because it is quite a complex one to actually understand. So can I get both on the screen at the same time? So I'm just going to put this onto pattern number 35. And as you can see, I've got 7 different sequences running, and these will be the pattern numbers which they are in. So sequence number 2, pattern number 5. So this should be sequence number 2, pattern number 5. I've managed to fit my 8 bars into my 4. So these are a single note, but I've put what's called, let's come down here, I've put a ratchet on them. So I've split them in half. So now obviously they're 16th notes. Great, so that works. And I can pitch the second one up. So we've got this pitch option. So that allows me to play the first note here and then pitch it up by 2. Then I'm going to play obviously this third note here, which is the second note in sequences. And then I can pitch it down by 4. And obviously I'm repeating that. So that's brilliant. So what do we do about this split? Well, I had a choice, and we're talking about this note here. I had a choice. I could split this note in half, and I say either, well, it's only a 1/8. I'm getting confused what I'm looking at here, the scales I'm on. Actually, that's a whole note, isn't it? Yeah. Terrible that I don't know this stuff, isn't it, really? So I could just ignore it and say I'm just going to have a shorter note, or I could double it up and, obviously put a razor down there and have it as 2 notes. Thankfully, the programmers and the way they've programmed sequences, I've actually been able to keep this as one long note. And what I've actually done is all these notes up to this point, including this note here. And in fact, we can, I don't know if I can actually highlight everything because we've got unfortunately this is on a different one. But basically I've used a condition. So I've told them they're only going to play on A. If you never used this, sorry, I should be clicking that one. So I've told it to play every A. So it's the very first time through it's going to play anything what's on, has this condition set, which is obviously all these notes up to this point here. And then all these, and there happen to be a lot more of these top notes, not every single one, but most of these top notes are going to be on condition B. They're on A as well. Oh, sorry, it's over here, isn't it? So, God, it's getting confusing. They should be on condition B. There we go. They're coming up as condition B. And luckily, I was able to tie this note, which is on condition A, with this note, which is on condition B. And it actually tied together. So that was brilliant. I didn't actually lose everything. I'll admit, when I put this in, I jumped around with joy. I felt clever when I done that. But it was such a, obviously this is the start of the project, and if I couldn't get this into Reason and call back whatever I wanted to, then there was no point in even going forward with this project. This step of the project was so fundamental, because without this step, we wouldn't be able to do the rest of the project. It's that simple. So far I've got all my notes obviously into Reason. I've got a way in which I can actually start selecting them, and obviously we can start playing them as well. I've got to have run pushed on these, don't I? Yeah. So I'm going to be, the next will be when I select them from here, I'm going to make sure I trigger all the sequences, and that should all be, that's actually quite a straightforward thing to do, to be perfectly honest. Other things I'm actually working on this very, very second is I actually running a spreadsheet as well. Can we pull the spreadsheet up? Yeah, here's the spreadsheet. So the rows are actually the different phrases. Obviously A1 will be, it's going to be pattern number 1 in sequencer A, and so on and so forth. The only reason these are slightly different is because they were originally B5 and 6 and I moved them across because see, I need to actually scroll down the spreadsheet, which I can do. So sequence A happens to be, so this row here are in 64th steps. This is in a 1/8 rate, or sorry, the rates, that's a 1/64th rate. This is a 1/8 rate, and this is a 16th rate. As you can see, I've got a lot of stuff down in the 16th rate, and yeah, 16th gives me 2 bars. The other thing I've actually done a very dirty calculation on is how long each of the bars are. The reason I refer to it as a dirty calculation, like the first one is 3/4 of a bar, but I've said fine, I'm going to round up to a bar, and if they fit in half a bar, that's fine. And then what I've done is I've taken these values and I've doubled them. And the reason I wanted whole numbers is because I'm taking these numbers, I'm going to be putting these into reason somehow. Yes, I could obviously store these as part of a voltage, so I could have 0.5, I could do other things. But I just felt I want to deal with whole numbers to start with, as this is my resolution, because that's all we're talking about. Just because I've doubled this number, this is just the resolution I'm going to be working in. And you're going to be hearing that term a lot throughout these projects that I'm going to be dealing with a lot of different resolutions to what you actually see here is a number to what's actually going on somewhere else. It's all yeah, it's all a lovely bit of fun. So at the moment, if I say go on to pattern number 1 again, you see it says pattern number 1, it means a 1 to us, but no, this isn't 1. This is actually a totally different value. And in fact, this value coming out of here, and if we put it into this one here, you better see it. There we go, there's the actual value, 0079. Everyone should recognise, I say everyone should recognise that number. Most people who are in the CV world will recognise that. That is actually a note. So a single note is, that's how the voltage of it. So if I was to add 2 of them together, I would be playing the equivalent of C# -2 on the keyboard. And then you just times them up. So if I times that by 60, I'd get to middle C. I've had to then take this number and I'm scaling it. And as you can see, I've actually scaled it right up. So because it's 007, I've scaled it up to 0.13. The reason I've scaled up to 0.13 is because I'm scaling these numbers up to fit the patterns, because if we're going from off to 8, so obviously there's 9 things which I've got to scale between. So then if obviously we go on to number 2, we move on to pattern number 2, and as you can see, it's virtually kind of double the rates, and so on and so forth. The numbers don't have to be exact here, because we're now taking an integer number, going into the CV world, and because we're... So it's quite, God, this stuff gets complex when you try and explain some of it. Because we're having to divide this by 9, we're giving ourselves zones. Hey, that's a way to work it, talk about it. Because we're dividing this 1 volt by 9, whatever that volt's going to be, we've given ourselves these little zones to play with. So it doesn't say, hey, let's say these are our different zones here. Because I've said there's 9 because there's an off as well. My voltage can be anywhere in between this sort of zone to select pattern. Say, here we go, number 3, pattern 3. As long as my voltage is in between this range and this range, it's always going to select number 3. And then as soon as it goes over, it'll be pattern number 4. So they don't have to be exact, as in I had 13, I had 26. It doesn't have to say 39 for it to work, you know. And so that's what I've got. So there's all this kind of scaling and all that sort of thing going on. Going forward, this is quite important because I may actually throw that away and actually change this to the proper scaling number. So this will directly change pattern 1 to pattern 1, but this won't say 1. This will probably end up saying, well, it'll probably say 13, to be honest with you. I'll have to probably push it up to 13 and then I can bypass that. So it just means I can take a step out. So everything I'm going to be doing going forward, I've really got to think about, because what you're looking at here is got to be times by however instruments I want. So if I want 16 instruments, this whole lot is going to be times up by 16. So yep, so at the moment I'm using I think 7 sequences. So that's going to be 7 sequences times by 16, which comes out as a very big number because my brain is just not working at the moment. It's going to be over, well over 100 sequences we're going to be using. And we've got loads of other gubbins to come in here. Yeah, I've got to build counters, so I need a counter to count this up and move this up and start working things out. And that's probably going to be my next step I'm actually going to do, is actually start building a logical counter and have an LFO or have something else move these forwards for me through the sequences. So that'd be my next stage. So as I say, this is just a very basic kind of video. It is obviously a waffle video. Hopefully I said that in the notes to start with, so you don't think, oh my God, I've just wasted my time watching this. But yeah, we're using things like the set program. It's great. Set program. And all right, here's one for you. What a lot of people don't think about is all your sequences, including this sequencer, including this set program, even this CV set out, because the way it would be work and all the rest of it, they're all voltage steppers. There you go, put that in your pipe. It's a weird one to think about. This sequencer is nothing more than a voltage stepper. Here they are. Here's all my different voltages. Yeah, just because we call them different, we call them notes and that, they're not. They're just a different voltage, and these are all different like voltage steppers. And that's the way you need to think of this. And this is a voltage stepper, and this is quite a clever one because obviously I can select my different programs, and I've got up to 8 different voltage selectors to go out. So there's a good chance going forward I might start storing the length in this one here, and then I can output that length to another section to say, right, the length of this particular one is this long, so I've got to play it for this amount of time, at least this amount of time. And then I might have some other algorithms going to say, right, now let's take that length and times it up by X amount. So we're going to play each pattern at least 4 times. And then I have a random process on top of that to say, am I going to move along to my next step? Am I allowed to move along to my next step? Because instrument number 8 is still back on this step over here and I might not be allowed. So I've got all this kind of stuff to try and figure out inside reason. I may step out to voltage modular because there is actually a real nice little formula module in that, but I'm going to try and contain it as much as possible inside reason as I possibly can. And you're going to see little things probably change over time of what's actually happening in this area, because obviously I'd probably like to get rid of this dual module, not because I don't like it, it's because it's one extra step I can probably remove away. And obviously the tighter and tighter we get it, the more chance we got with the timing, because that's another big concern I've got in the back of my mind, is the timing. When we start expanding this out and the CV starts to go out, we're going to start running into this higher DSPs. Obviously you can see at the moment there's not really going on, but I can just suddenly see this expanding right out and going out of control if you're not careful. So I really am going to probably come up with things, and then you're going to see them another day and they're going to be literally stripped down to the most basic modules I possibly can make it, to try and make it as efficient as possible. I really have waffled enough. These are going to be short videos going forward. He says I will try and keep them as short as possible. Anyway, hopefully you're going to follow this series of In C, and it's going to be for me personally, it's going to be quite exciting because, as I say, there's so much to do and to work out, and I haven't even. I think I need to sit down and maybe do a big flow diagram of how things really should sit together and work together. But as I say, step number 1, I've got all my phrases actually in reason, and I can call them up. I can call any phrase I want up, and it's great. That was such a big tick. Okay, bye for now.